because I had invested in that relationship earlier, then it paid off. You never know when you're going to get paid back for just investing in being, it's simple stuff, being respectful of people, being a good listener. It's just those sort of soft skills.
Your bio mentions your presence in the Center for East Asian Studies. And so that's where I'd like to start. We'd like to really find out more about institution building and think about how that is one way to thrive in higher education, is to participate in the institution building of your own institution. So very, very curious to find out more about the biggest exercise in institution building that you have conducted. And could you tell us, start with the end of the project that you led? What's the final point? What is this? What did you create in the Center for East Asian Studies?
Okay, so yeah, institution building is just it's something that when I came to the UW in 2003, one of the first things that somebody asked me to do was, could you please be the director of the Center for East Asian Studies? And I had never done any administration before. I had never headed anything. And I was a little intimidated because I thought, well, I don't know how to do this. But I worked for about 5 years being the director of this Area Studies Center. And I also worked with the Dean of International Studies. And I learned about fundraising and worked to raise a lot of outside money from the organizations like the Japan Foundation and the Korea Foundation. And the sort of culmination of those efforts, working with other people, was to really kind of rebuild Asian studies at the UW. When I came, it was really in a terrible shape. We lost this big federal grant, all kinds of faculty positions. People had left and they were not being replaced. We had no Korean studies at all. And the China and Japan faculties were kind of really very hostile to each other and in a mutual state of kind of fighting and antagonism. I kind of called it the Sino-Japanese War. But by the end of my period, I did make some really big mistakes that were opportunities for learning. But by the end, I had really helped to grow the Korean Studies program. We have a very, robust Korean Studies now. The Chinese and Japanese faculty are, working together really nicely. And we have, really grown the faculty, especially in the humanities. So like now we have 7 East Asianists in history, which is really unusual in the United States. So I'm really proud of all of that.
Great. Now, stepping back a little bit on this multi-year project, after you got past your boss, people wanted you to take it on and, okay, how am I going to do it? What was like your first steps? So I'm thinking about somebody in higher education or in any job being given a major project to do, and it may be multi-year project, as you said. What do you think is a key step as a first step that you need to do?
So I think that one of the first things to do is I think there's sort of 2 things that you want to do at first. And one is to kind of go around and do, listen and learn about the institution and, I had to really figure out what is East Asian Studies at the University of Wisconsin. So I did a lot of talking to people, and part of that, talking to people also helped me identify potential people that you could form alliances with to do the building, because these efforts, you can never do it as one person. And you can't, it's also not very effective to just try to be telling people what to do. It's much more effective to invite people to join you. So that first step was really kind of looking really broadly at my institution, not just the obvious places like the history department and the language departments, but where else is East Asian studies at this institution, and what what are its kind of strengths and weaknesses and possibilities. So that was sort of where I started.
It's so great because when you talk about that is talking to people, and I think that's so important to mention because it's like on a new job, rather than just rushing in there and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Talking to people that are there, what are some issues, some concerns, getting to know the organization instead of these are just all my ideas, is actually learning and getting that feedback and information. So that is so key. So thank you for sharing that about the importance of getting feedback and talking and communication before you just like lay out a whole big plan that may not even fit, you know.
Right. It's true. Exactly. Yes. And people definitely, they, when somebody comes in from the outside, they're of course happy to have your energy and your new resources and whatever skill sets you bring to it. But also they, they don't want to have somebody come in and like say, well, yeah, I see immediately what has to be done here. It's much more, it's just disrespectful for one thing, but also it's really not a winning strategy to do it that way. So yeah.
Yeah, great. And you also reinforced a couple of things Emily Young said on her podcast about fundraising, the importance of that, collaboration, and getting the support from others and working with others. So, yeah, definitely reinforced some great ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. I mean, just listening to you, though, it still seems so big. Like even just the notion of you going, jogging across campus from department to department to, get people's ideas and buy-in and everything. So, knowing that you are, of course, Superwoman, but if you weren't Superwoman, what are some of the things that it took to be successful at this institution building?
Well, let's see. So one of the things that I feel like was most effective, and first of all, I over the course of the 5 years, I would say the first 2 years, I made a lot of mistakes, and people got really angry at me for different things that I kind of handled a little awkwardly, not as skillfully as I could have. So, be prepared to make some mistakes. And the thing is, at one point, everybody was very like in this Chinese-Japanese kind of competition. I had the whole entire Chinese faculty up in arms against me. But the funny thing is, and that was really stressful, but by 3 years later, because of some things I sort of did some course corrections, then now they decided that they loved me because, they saw me differently. So you can always course correct. So that's one thing to really keep in mind, because you will stumble as you're learning to be a leader, and figure out what your own leadership style is. That you will make mistakes. Everybody does. So be prepared for that, and know that if you correct, and if you do something different, and if you figure out a different way to bring people together, everybody's going to think about the latest thing. They're not going to remember something that happened, 5 miles back. So that was a really important lesson. The other thing that I would say is it's really important to sort of keep your eye on, again, the long game. Don't worry about something that there's a lot of immediate, how to put this? So when you're trying to develop something or build something, so one of the things that I wanted to do was to build up the Japanese library collection. But, you know, there's very scarce money for library resources and everybody wants them. And so you're going to encounter a lot of struggles over those resources. That's just part of the landscape of the university. And one of the things that I learned was that it's much more important to keep your eye on the long game rather than the immediate contest. So I lost some, I wouldn't call, you know, like just not fights over resources, but things that I wanted to get for the Japanese library program, and they ended up going to the Chinese library program. But you know, in the end, it was more important to lose that, and in the process, keep working and keep maintaining those relationships and develop alliances and partnerships with my Chinese studies colleagues, rather than win that one fight and then everybody's mad at you and for a while. So the thing to think about is not having to win every single battle, but to think more strategically in terms of keeping people on your side in the long run. And so, give and take, win and lose, that's all part of a longer term process. And in that sense, if you can identify just one person by one person, like people in other departments, and sometimes that you think, oh, this person, they also will want to improve, whether it's library resources or getting computers or getting people to. Another big thing that I wanted was to hire, to have support for hiring Japanese studies and Asian studies faculty, because we really needed to replace these faculty lines. And that, so I discovered that going to other departments and finding faculty who were also interested in that goal, and then kind of talking about what they want, how they saw it, what their vision of, sort of developing new faculty lines was. And then we together came up with a proposal, and we would go to the dean to talk about it. And we would often try to sort of sweeten the pie by thinking, are there any outside resources we can try to bring to this? And often, even if you could get a really small outside grant, it won't pay for the whole thing, but if you get, bring $10,000 in here, and then you say to the dean, look, here's 5 of us from 5 different departments or 5 different units, and we've raised this outside money. We've been meeting. Here's our proposal. You write it up. And, it's sometimes deans can't do anything, but if they can, they do try to be responsive to that kind of appeal rather than just going as one person.
As I've been listening to you, this conversation is about institution building and what it took for you to be successful at that, but really the strategies and the kind of the approach that you're sharing is going to make it all of us more successful and feel more meaning in what we do. And so that's really a blessing. So the only other, I just wanted to ask is whether you have anything else, any other tips that you want to share.
There was just one other thing that I did want to say, which is that sort of surprised me at first, the very beginning of this, the sort of years that I was intensely devoting my energy to institution building. One of the things that I found I got a really positive reaction from other people was just enthusiasm. And that you know, that I figured out something that I was excited about. And, as I looked at the university, I thought, I love this institution. It's got so much possibility. And when I would talk to other people about, we could do this or we could do that, um, what people told me later that they said, your infectious enthusiasm. They use the word infectious enthusiasm. And that's another one. It's not, it's not rocket science. It's a generalizable thing. You can be enthusiastic about something that you love, and universities are wonderful places. So it's not that hard to find something to get excited about. And so that's something that everybody can do. And it's a very winning strategy.